We're going to see an incredible insight from the Rebbe about how we're supposed to view ourselves and our fellow Jews based on something that Rashi says about the Bechor firstborn offering that goes to the Kohanim, which is in this week's parasha. In our parasha, from the Torah talks about the various kosher animals where you have to give the firstborn to the Kohanim, and one of the things it says is, you cannot redeem it. They are supposed to be holy. As Dom and Tizra, you have to sprinkle their blood on the Mizbeach, and you take the insides and the fats, and you bring them on the Mizbeach, and the meat goes to the Kohanim, to the Kohanim. And how, in what way, says the Torah, that it will be like the chest and like the leg, the thigh of an animal, which is usually part of the Shlomim offering, and this part goes to the Kohanim. So Rashi comments on these words that compares the Bechor to these particular elements of the Korban Shlomim. And Mizmefarish explains what it means is this. Shel Shlomim, that it's compared to these parts of the animal which belong to the Shlomim offering, Shenech Konim LaKehanim, that are eaten by the Kehanim, not only the Kohanim themselves, but in Shem V'Livneim, and to their wives, and to their children, Ula Avdeim, and to their servants, and it's eaten over a period of 2 days and a night. So in the same way as Shlomim is eaten in that particular way, likewise the firstborn is Nechel Shnei Yomim, V'layla Echad is eaten over the course of 2 days and 1 night, and that raises some questions. From Fashtem we have to understand something about what Rashi is saying over here, because Rashi heaped on by Shlomim mitzvei pratim. When Rashi talks about the halachas of the Shlomim, he says there are 2 details. Aleph, number 1, ver ken ze'esen, who's allowed to eat the shlomim, which is like Kohanim and Shem Livneim Lavdeim, the Kohanim, their wives, their children, and their servants. Then he gives a second halacha, which is Beis Ven Zever Gegesen, when you eat the Korban Shlomim, which is over the course of 2 days and 1 night. On his Messiah, yet when he compares that to the Bechor, he concludes only with the blois mit ein prat, with one of the details, which is likewise the Bechor is eaten over the course of 2 days and 1 night. So you say, well, that's really strange. Either way you look at it, what Rashi's done over here doesn't seem to make sense. Because Rashi is if the reason Rashi left out the detail that the Bechor can be eaten by the wives and the children, etc., maybe that's because Rashi believes that it's not true, that Bechor, unlike a Shlomim, is only eaten by the male Kehanim. If that was the case, then he shouldn't have quoted that is a halacha of Shlomim, because it's irrelevant in this particular context. Whereas on the other hand, if in fact the halacha is that the family of the Kohen and his servants get to share in the Shlomim, is a mashmit by Bechor. So why doesn't Rashi give us that information when he tells us how the Bechor is eaten? It'd be ridiculous to suggest that Rashi is doing this for the sake of brevity, because he wouldn't leave out something which is practical halacha just to keep his commentary succinct. Besides which, if he's hurt, the truth of the matter is, he didn't even have to say those words, that the Bechor is eaten over the course of 2 days and 1 night. If he wants to be brief, it could have been very brief and said, that the Bechor has the same rules as the Shlomim. Or he could have left out that entire comparison between the Bechor and the Shlomim. So D to me is not Kresser. So this strange approach that Rashi takes, where he's only giving us one of the elements that belongs to a Shlomim in the context of a Bechor, is even stranger when you look at what Rashi is basing his commentary on. The Mocha from the Pirush Rashi is in Sifri Gemara. Rashi is basing himself on the Sifri on our Parasha and the Gemara in Zvachim. On in debate and neither one of those sources speaks about the fact that the Shlomim is shared between the family of the Kohanim and the servants. Nit by Shlomim or nit by Bechor. The Gemara and the Medrash, the Sifri, don't record it in the context of Shlomim, nor in the context of Bechor. All the Gemara and the Medrash over there say is just as Shlomim is eaten over 2 days and 1 night, the same is to the Bechor. Rashi is Mashana from Sifrin Gemara, on his Mosif Tempratu Bibfirusha. Yet Rashi decides to add information that's not in his source and to tell us that the Shlomim is also eaten by the whole family. Why does he do that? Before we can understand this, let's look at what Rashi says next. Then Rashi quotes the end of that pasuk, which says that these elements, this meat will be yours, the Kohanim. And as Mefarish explains as follows: Rabbi Akiva came along and he taught, the Torah already said Yiyeh Lecha. Now it's adding Lecha Yiyeh, so it's a second so to speak, transmission that it's giving to the Kohanim. Why? That you shouldn't mistakenly believe that the law of the Bechor is similar to the parts of the meat of a Toida offering which the Kohen eats, because that's only eaten in the course of a day and a night. And you have to understand over here that the Bechor is not like that. So we need to understand 4 questions over here. Number 1, Aleph, as we know multiple times the Rebbe has pointed out to us, is Rashi matik dem shem balamayim nor. The only time that Rashi quotes the name of who he's quoting is when nor in afal if knowing who said it will help us understand it better. Done in our case, das wird doch besser verständig durch was wird doch besser verständig durch die Idee als der Maimon hat gesagt Rabbi Akiva. So what do we understand better about this topic, knowing that it was Rabbi Akiva who said it? Base question number 2 is, what's the Arichas HaLashon? Why is Rashi giving us such a roundabout message? Bo Rabbi Akiva, ve'limed. Rabbi Akiva came along and he taught. Rashi should have just said short and sweet, like he normally does. Omer Rabbi Akiva. The Mokif of Rabbi Akiva is in Sifri and Gemara. Now, where does Rashi find Rabbi Akiva's opinion? Both in the Sifri and in the Gemara. And the interesting thing is that in both of those cases, it also uses an unusual expression. It says Kofatz Rabbi Akiva. It's almost like Rabbi Akiva jumped into the conversation and gave his opinion. Why does it do that? Because Rabbi Akiva's opinion is in the middle of a conversation and debate that's already happening in the Gemara. But if you know the whole context, like in the Gemara or in the Sifri, then it makes sense to say that Rabbi Akiva is jumping into the conversation. Why? Because the context is they posed this question to the sages who were learning at that time in Yavne. And the question was, what's the time period of eating the Bechor? Rabbi Tarfon says he didn't know the answer. So Rabbi Yosef is the one who posed the question. Rabbi Tarfon, who's the great sage of the yeshiva, doesn't have the answer. So the Gemara tells us somebody else inserted themselves into this conversation. Rabbi Akiva jumped into the conversation. And he gave an opinion that wasn't actually addressed. Well, the question wasn't actually addressed to him. So that makes sense in the context of the Gemara, where you have the whole backstory to say that Rabbi Akiva is jumping into the conversation. But why would Rashi use the expression over here when he says that Rabbi Akiva came to offer an opinion? Considering that Rashi is not giving us that whole background of the debate that was the precipitator of Rabbi Akiva jumping into the conversation, so why use that language? Question number 3, Gim. The fact that a Bechor is eaten over the course of 2 days and a night does not require extra words in the pasuk to say l'chayiyeh means you can have it for an extra day. Says Rashi says. It's actually something we learn directly from a pasuk much later on, admittedly, but in Parashas Re'eh. Rashi says we learn from the pasuk that says Shalom B'Shalom that teaches us that a Bechor is eaten over 2 days and 1 night. So why do we need to explain it over here? And lastly, from wann it is a hechach, von as l'chayiyeh is a riboy, and just looking at the pshat of the psukim, l'chayiyeh means this meat is yours. Why does that indicate that there's more information that's coming to add more? That the Torah is adding another, so to speak, transmission or handing over of the meat to the Kohanim. Why don't we just say it simply? L'chayiyeh, they're going to be yours. So the Birbuchol's explanation is Rashi is bothered by the fact that our pasuk seems to use language that is superfluous, which is never the way that the Torah speaks. Because if you think about it, the pasuk's already said the meat of these Bechorim will be yours. As the that the meat of the Bechor belongs to the Kohen. Why does the Torah have to then say what it is like? That will be to you like the shlamim pieces. Who needs that? It says simply the meat belongs to the Kohanim. That's all I need to know. Therefore, Rashi says those extra words is there to teach us another halacha about the Bechor. In Vosfar, if in fact Besarim Nechol, a halacha that defines under what circumstances the meat of the Bechor can be eaten by the Kohanim. Well, one of the possible halachas is the time frame in which you eat the Bechor, and if that's what it's telling us, that you eat it over the course of 2 days and 1 night, like the meat of the shlamim that goes to the Kohanim, is it verstandig? That wouldn't make any sense. Because why does the pasuk have to allude to that? Sagen dem din durch vergleichen zu einem korban. Why does the Torah have to go in such a convoluted way? You know when you should eat the bechor. Well, remember the shlamim? Whatever the law is there, that's the law here. And it's such an indirect way by comparing it to the pieces of meat that the kohanim get when they eat shlamim. As dann ist es nicht klar, dass Menschen shlamim echol mit shnei yom echad, oder shel teida sheinen echol yom v'layla. Especially when you consider that the chazeh and the shoik could belong to a regular shlamim which is eaten over the period of 2 days and 1 night, and then that applies to a bechor, or it could be talking about a toida which is 1 day and 1 night, and then that applies to the bechor, and we don't really know. And then we need to add more words to the pasuk to clarify that, to say l'chol means it's an additional period of time that you could eat the meat of the bechor. The Torah should have been very simple and direct to say, like it says in other places, you can eat it on the day that you bring the korban and the following day, and then we would know that it's Shnei Yom Echad. So therefore is Rashi machriach that compels Rashi to say that the words is there to teach us a halacha. The halacha cannot be simply time, because time could have been said in a more direct way. Therefore, these words that compare the bechor to shlamim must be meint mer dem ein din. It can't just mean one halacha, that it's the same time frame as a shlamim, not svei dinim, but rather it's teaching us 2 of the halachas of shlamim that apply to bechor, namely shnei cholim, that they're eaten alef, like that the meat of the bechor can be shared with the kohen's family and his servants, and basically shnei yom that could be over a period of 2 days and a night. Now we understand where Rashi is coming from. Now we understand why Rashi is so adamant that you cannot compare the bechor to the halachas that apply to a toida. And that is learned out of the words l'chayeh. He doesn't want to wait until we get to Parshas Re'eh, and then we will know that the bechor is eaten over 2 days and a night. Why? Because if we're going to say that there is no reference to the time frame of eating a bechor in our pasuk, it's only dealt with in Parshas Re'eh, then you're going to have to say, okay, so kachazeh atnufach shekayom is not telling us the time frame. In that case, as mit kachazeh atnufach shekayom meant the pasuk blows ein din. That's only there to teach us one halacha, which is nechol hakahanim v'nisheim v'vnei l'abdeim. Who could eat the bechor? That it's the entire kohen's family. So you're telling me these extra words are just there to teach me that single halacha v'et shver kanal. Back to the same question. If the pasuk wants to tell us one halacha, why is it hinting at the halacha by comparing it to the parts of the shlamim that a kohen eats? Why doesn't it just say clearly that it's nechol, or however the Torah is going to say it? As Vadim steht beferish by Trumas Matanim B'chol Tenufos Bnei Yisrael, especially if you consider that before this, when it was talking about the other gifts that go to the Kehanim, there it says, Lechones Hatim, I've given those gifts to you, Levonech B'nei Secha, and to your families. And we can extrapolate that if the children are allowed to participate in eating those particular gifts that are given to the Kehanim, so to the wives and so to the Avodim. We could say the same thing over here. So either way you look at it, must be telling us that there are multiple halachas about the Bechor which are similar to Shlamim, and we're identifying, according to Rashi, 2 of them, the time frame and who could eat it. Therefore, Rashi says the extra words l'chayeh and the pasuk must be klor there to clarify for us dem din von shnei yomim v'layla echad havoya acheres, as an extra period of time that the meat is given of the bechor is given to the kohanim to eat, and therefore we know that it's for a second day that you could eat it. Over meila. And therefore, the words that compare the bechor to shlamim, the words are teaching us 2 halachas. Firstly, that the meat of the bechor can be eaten by the entire family of the kohen, as well as the fact that it can be eaten over the period of 2 days and a night. But there's still a question. If this pasuk is coming to teach us 2 halachas, then why does Rashi only clarify one of them? Where he compares us to a shlamim, tells us the 2 halachas of the shlamim, and then says, likewise a bechor, and he only explains the time frame, and he doesn't say anything about who could eat it. The explanation of that is we're reading Rashi wrong. The two pirushim that Rashi gives. First, he explains that's the comparison of Shlomim and Bechor. Then he explains which is Havoya Acheres. They're not completely independent commentaries on this pasuk. They flow. Now, das ist ein Hemmschach. Rashi sagt dem Limud von Shlomim und der Sinn von dem seine die Werte auf Bechor. So, this is how we have to read Rashi. Firstly, Rashi says the Bechor is like a Shlomim. The Shlomim has two laws to it. It can be eaten by the Kohen and his family and his servants, and it's eaten over 2 days and one night. Af HaBechor, the same applies to Bechor. End of that commentary. Whatever the laws are about the meat of Shlomim that Kohanim eat, they apply to Bechor as well. Und dennoch, once Rashi has completed telling us that comparison, hebt Rashi und sagt that's fake, and then Rashi tells us something completely different and independent. Not independent, but a whole new insight. The halach I've just told you, that the Bechor is like a Shlomim, and therefore part of that means that it is eaten over the course of 2 days and one night. Let me explain to you more about that fact. That the words that follow next in the pasuk Rabbi Akiva comes to teach us that it means that that the Torah, so to speak, extended the period over which a kohen could eat this meat. But then prat is nicht genug the limit from the Shlomim. So the fact that the Bechor is eaten by the entire Kohen's family, that we could derive directly from the words that it's like a Shlomim. But the fact that it's eaten over 2 days and one night, we need further information to help us clarify that. Why do we need further information? Because as we've mentioned, you might misunderstand and say, okay, fine. So Bechor is like a Shlomim. There are various kinds of Shlomim. One of those is a Toida. The Toida is only eaten for a single day and a night. Maybe the Bechor is the same. Therefore, the Torah has to add extra words. That the Torah gives, so to speak, a second bringing of this korban into the family of the Kohanim. In other words, extending the time frame in which they could eat it. And that would explain why Rashi doesn't just say, this is the halacha, and he doesn't just say Rabbi Akiva taught it, but he says Rabbi Akiva came to teach it. What does that mean? As the period is nit as scholas inyan. Rashi wants us to be clear that although we're under a new Divrei HaMaschil now, the words L'cha Yiyeh, don't think that this is now a new independent commentary that has nothing to do with the preceding commentary. Was demelt paste teloshem Bar Rabbi Akiva, because then you would never say Bar Rabbi Akiva, you would say Rabbi Akiva. Now, says a hemshech by saying Rabbi Akiva came, it means he came to continue the conversation we had in the previous Dibur HaMaschil, und inmitten dem Pirush bekesher zu die friedige Wörter Shnei Yomim v'Layla Echad. In the previous Dibur HaMaschil, we said there are two halachas about a Bechor. Who eats it? The whole family. And when do you eat it? Over 2 days and a night. Over 2 days and a night. But Rabbi Akiva came to give us insight into that part of the halacha. Rashi anticipates that you're going to have the question, who says that you eat the Bechor over that time frame? Maybe it's like a korban toida. How do we know that we're comparing a Bechor to a regular Shlomim and not specifically to a toida? So to address that, because he anticipates this question, he says, well, let's bring Rabbi Akiva into this conversation, because he analyzes the words L'cha Yiyeh in such a way that help us to understand that the Torah extended the time frame within which you could eat the Bechor. But the sharpest student will still have a question, which is, as the the language of this pasuk doesn't seem to flow well. In one pasuk, the Torah has used the same expression, essentially. The meat's going to be yours. L'cha is going to be yours. Is mistaber zu sagen, als das setzt sich in demselben in kedele chazkei. So a normal reading of the pasuk would think, oh, the Torah is just emphasizing something that it has already said before. And we see the Torah do this in other places. From Parashat Shlach. Here's an example. The beginning of Parashat Shlach. What does it say? Steht ish echad lamate. One person per tribe. That's to emphasize. Only one represented by tribe. Likewise, the Karbonos that the Nesim brought to inaugurate the Mizbeach in Parashas Nosoi. Nasi echad layom, nasi echad layom. There the Torah also repeats itself to emphasize the fact that it's one representative per day. And in neither case does Rashi feel that he has to explain why the Torah is repeating itself. Because pshat doesn't have to be explained if it's self-evident. And it's self-evident over here that the pshat is the Torah is repeating something to emphasize and to strengthen the particular message. But the way we're explaining in our pasuk turns out as the Eish to tell from pasuk, the first part of the pasuk that says that the meat of the bechor will be for you, the koyanim, like the portions of a shlamim offering, is neat adin proti nor adin klali. That's not yet getting into the details. It's giving us an overarching view of the halacha, that the halacha of a bechor is like the halacha of a shlamim. A general comparison of the bechor to the shlamim is in mervi ein prat, meaning when you have a general comparison, that means that it will be similar in more than one way. In our case, in two ways. That the whole family gets to eat it, or and that it's eaten over 2 days. On the loshen lechayiye besiyum pasuk. Now, lechayiye at the end of the pasuk is not emphasizing what we already know, that a bechor has to be eaten like a shlamim, but rather kumar bezayin ein prat in dem zman in dem din fun zman achilose. That is coming to highlight one detail about the time frame in which you have to eat the bechor. The Pharisee, now that's a bit strange, right? It's not normally how psukim work. Psukim normally repeat themselves to emphasize a point, not to alter the point or add information that we don't necessarily already have. Unless you know who's interpreting the pasuk. The Pharisee madgish as dem maimerot gisok Rabbi Akiva. That's why Rashi has to tell us, you know who taught this insight? Rabbi Akiva. It's his standard approach to understanding psukim. He's following his approach, which is Rabbi Akiva does not believe that the Torah speaks language that is familiar to humans just to make it easier for us to understand. In which case, if the Torah repeats something, it's not just simply to emphasize the point, as you and I might speak. But whenever the Torah adds another expression that sounds similar to what it's already said, it's adding more information that it didn't already give us before. Doubled expressions are expressions that add more information to the story. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva is following his shitta in our particular case, and he learns as the choyeh is a riboy, that the extra words the choyeh are adding extra information that we didn't necessarily realized before, that the Torah is adding an extra time frame within which you could eat this shlamim offering. You'll say, how come suddenly over here Rashi is going according to Rabbi Akiva's opinion? To say that the Torah does not speak the language of people. How could Rashi say that? When we have much evidence to the fact that that Rashi believes that according to Pshat, the Torah does speak the language of people. And therefore, von dem, was Rabbi Akiva learned, as the Kefelosh ish echad lamate, kumt mar bezayin, as es seinen gewen, chov daled meraglim. He has a great proof. In Pasha Shlach, Rabbi Akiva is of the view that because it says ish echad l'shavit, it actually means 2 meraglim per tribe to a total of 24. Whereas Rashi simply says there were 12 meraglim, following the pshat. So how could it be that Rashi ordinarily believes that the Torah speaks the language of people, and now suddenly he's happy to take Rabbi Akiva's opinion that that is not the case, and therefore if the Torah adds language, it's there to add insight? Because that's because in Parashat Shlach we're talking about 12 shvatim. That means there are 12 distinctions of the Jewish nation. And therefore it's verstandig al derech hapshat as the pasuk madgish zayin as jede shevet hot gehat ish echad. And therefore it makes sense that the Torah is emphasizing specifically that these 12 shvatim each had their unique person representing them. On the Pharisee shechad, which is why it repeats the expression, and likewise in Parshas Nasi where it repeats the expression that there is a single Nasi representative per day, but the Kabbalah Sanisim. But here, there's no reason to have the words l'chayeh unless it's there to teach us something else. So it is quite plausible that Rashi will ordinarily say that the Torah speaks the language of people, but if there's something glaring, like in our case, where there's really no value in repeating the same words twice, it must be aligned with Rabbi Akiva's opinion to teach us information we didn't necessarily know, and that is, don't make the mistake of comparing a bechor to that specific kind of shlamim called a Torah, and then think that the time limit for eating it is more reduced. Recognize that the Torah gave you an extended period within which you could eat it. Now, all of this is going to teach us an incredible lesson about ourselves. In Sifriyo Gemara is da hava minu zu vergleichen bechor zu chatas ve'osham. Here we're seeing that it seems to us pretty clear that we're comparing the Bechor and its halachas to the Shlamim and its halachas. But in the original Gemara and Sifri, when they debate this, there is a suggestion put forward that maybe the Bechor should have the same halachas, the same legal parameters as the Chatas sin offering or the Asham guilt offering. Val, for what reason? Val say because those korbanos are 100% given to the kohanim, unlike a shlamim which is shared. They're 100% given to the kohanim. And that particular approach wanted to suggest that in the same way as a chatas and asham have to be eaten within the framework of a day and the night that follows, the same should have applied to the bechor. Yet it's interesting, Rashi doesn't breathe a word about that. Even though the Gemara spoke about the fact that there is an opinion that thinks that maybe the Bechor should be treated like a Chatas and Asham, Rashi is saying it is like a Shlamim, says a Shlamim, not a Torah. You would have thought maybe it's a Shlamim, not a Chatas and Asham. Why is that? But is their time. The simplest reason would be because Rashi is quoting the words which are not parts of the animal that would be specific to a chatas and asham. Because a chatas and asham, the entire animal belongs to the kohen. Unlike a shlamim, where the chazeh and the shoik, the chest and the thigh, are specific to the kohanim. So maybe that's the easiest way to answer this. Whereas in the Gemara, where it is going through the whole thorough comparison of which particular korban and its legal ramifications would be most appropriate to compare to the Bechor, so there you could say, they were not looking at the words in the pasuk to determine, we're just trying to work out and understand logically which korban, a korban that is given as a gift to the kohanim, well, a bechor as a gift to the kohanim is maybe the most similar to those. So following svara, you could come up with an argument that says it is compared to chatas and asham, and Rashi is not going there because it's not relevant to the words in the pasuk. That would sound like a good explanation. But the truth is Rashi is also layering his commentary and giving us an insight over here which is relevant, so to speak, on a more sublime level. Bechor is aremes hafidin. Here we're talking about the korban called Bechor, or the Bechor which is gifted to the kohanim. A firstborn is a symbolism of the Jewish people, as we know, because the very first message that the Eibusha told Moshe Rabbeinu to convey to Paroi, which defines the Jewish people, is B'nai Bechor Yisrael, that the Yidden are the Eibusha's firstborn. Bechor Adam. So our parasha is talking about the Bechor of an animal, but here we're talking about Bechor Adam, the firstborn of a human. Al Shem Idam Elyon. Humans are called humans because we're comparable to the Eibishter, or we're supposed to aspire to be similar to the Eibishter. Chelek Elokam Yimal. We have an neshama that is a part of the Eibishter. That refers to his nefesh halikis. That refers to the nefesh halikis. Bechor Behema Tahira is the nefesh haba misfuna Eden. So you have the firstborn human, is a representation of our godly soul, and the firstborn animal is a representation of our animal soul. But it's still a kosher animal, which is really important because, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that even the nefesh habahamis of a Jewish person is not absolute klippa. On the far Zok the pasuk bechor sher kesev eis, which would also explain why the pasuk went through the three types of animals, species of animals, from which you give the firstborn. Because vasayin kayodua the dry klolistikin sugim in nefesh habahamis should be sold, as is explained in multiple places in Chassidus. They represent the three typical variants of the animal soul that a Jewish person possesses. Okay, so we've got the animal soul over here. It's Rashi Rashi does not have to get into the detail of telling us a bechor is nothing like a chatas and asham. Why not? Because Rashi is looking at pshat, the simplest understanding of what a Jew is. The simplest understanding of a Jew, which is the simplest manifestation of a Jew. Is nicht talking the simplest understanding of who a Jew is at the most basic level is someone who is incapable of sin. Chatas and Osham is not part of their reality. If we talk about the neshama, needless to say, steht in Zerba, Pashtus, Pshittus, Eifem Posuk, Nefesh, Kisechta. The Zohar tells us very clearly that when it comes to a person who sins, the expression is Nefesh. Says the Zohar, Tavha, that is so surprising. As I feel in B'chinas Nefesh, the niedrigste Darge von die Chamisha Shemesh, the Nikra Nefesh Elikis. When you're dealing with Nefesh, which is the lowest of the 5 titles ascribed to the neshama. Is that Mia Uplia Vikenzi Durchfallen Nachet? The Zohar is completely shocked at the suggestion that even the Nefesh could engage with an Aveira. That goes without saying. The neshama is immune to Aveiras. Tutov Rashi noch aggressive chidish. Rashi tells us something even more incredible. As afilu b'chor behema, even the firstborn animal, which we said is in nefesh bamis v'nayidin, the animal soul of a Jew, which we always think is so to speak, off the rails, is mitzad atzmo nit shayach tzachet. The nefesh habahamis of a yid, left to its own devices, is incapable of an aveira. Unochme, not only that, afilu besoram, the pasuk says, besoram yeloch, their flesh belongs to you, the kohanim. The gufo gashmi shelo, even the human body of a Jewish person, is euch nicht talking kochsalkodaitach zu vergleichen und machen ashayches sachates ve'osham. Rashi says it doesn't even enter our minds to suggest that the body of a Jew should be in any way linked to, related to, comparable to sin. A Jew of his or her own accord is immune to sin. Nor what are we compared to? The parts of the animal that are given as the shlomim offering. Das, was die nefesh kis von Eiden is your doveni slapshin and nefesh habamis in our gufo gashmi. The fact that our nefesh kis had to go through this major descent in order to enter the human being, live in our body, coupled with the nefesh habamis, is bichdei as of von machen shlomim. The whole purpose of that was to create a shlomim. What is a shlomim? Why is that korban called a shlomim? Because it's shalom be'olam. It brings peace into the world, which means that means even our lowly, materialistic, physical worlds of should become at peace with the Eibusha, should be a home to accommodate Hashem's essence. So it goes without question in Rashi's mind that there is no link between even the nefesh habahamis, even the guf of a yid, and sin. So we're not going to say the bechor is not like a chatas Hashem. That goes without saying. What we do have to say is a bechor is not like a toida. What does that mean? You shouldn't suggest that the bechor has to be treated in the same way as the toida offering. A toida is a korban shlamim. A toida falls under the broader category of a shlomim offering. Berinyane is, but what is the specific nature of a toida? As fir is the odom given in a matzav shel sakona. A toida is that a person was previously in a dangerous situation. Oner is the fund gerativ givorin an eifim bilti rogil, and the person was then saved in an unusual way from that danger. B'derech nes, he had a miracle in his life. And that's why he's bringing the korban toida to give gratitude to the Eibusha for the miracle that saved him from a terrible situation. What that represents in spiritual terms is a person who is having a terribly difficult challenge in serving the Eibusha, something that imperils his spiritual life. But he's able to escape the danger through a nace. What's a nace? We know that when a person habituates themselves to a particular behavior, that becomes their nature. So therefore, miraculous behavior is doing something out of the ordinary, beyond their nature. This is a person who is willing to sacrifice for the Eibusha in a completely irrational way. That's how they escape this potentially threatening situation. On the far is which makes you think, even if we accept that a Jew is really not susceptible to Averis. But because the Jew lives inside a human body with an nefesh habahamis, is a shayach tznisyonis v'chayotze b'zeh sakana that exposes the Jew to the kinds of challenges which could imperil, can endanger his spirituality. As I asked the shlomim, the shalom ba'olam, which means that the shlomim is going to bring, the harmony is going to create in his life, the synthesis between holiness and the physical. Vasatutuf is verbunden mit hanes. The only way he gets to do it is because he had to have some kind of a serious nefesh and some kind of miraculous escape from serious challenges. It's Rashi's Shelel Oichdiko Salkadaita. Comes along Rashi and he says, even that suggestion is impossible. Because the simple basic reality of a Jew is that every one of us not only experiences, not only has, but sees illuminated within them absolute faith in the Eibishter. And therefore the Jew is always loyal to the Eibishter in all circumstances. If as I feel as to the extent that there's no possibility for any alternative. There cannot be in a Jewish person's reality something that interferes with the connection to Hashem. Even if a Jew is conscious of the fact that there are challenges, and he has to escape those challenges or be saved from those challenges. And if he feels that he needs a miracle to escape those challenges, the only way that can happen is because something has gotten into this person's system that is a non-Jewish perspective. No different to an outright Avera, which a Jew really has absolutely no relationship to. It has to be superimposed by the Yetzer Hara or Ruach Shtus. Because the nature of a Jew is to be completely disconnected from any possibility of something which is negative. And therefore that translates in physical terms as when a Jew behaves as a Jew should behave. Doesn't need miracles. Made a carbon toilet doesn't need to have a carbon toilet. Not physically. We're protected and we're immune to all kind of threats because the Eibush is with us. And the Eibush is with us. The Eibush protects us. And when we follow the Eibish's way, which is living in the light of the Eibish's eternal life, the Eibishter gives us all of the brachas that we need: health, family, parnasa, v'kulam, revicha, and all of them in the most abundant way. And Mitzvah Hashem, we should live this way. We should see only brachas b'goloi, and we should see the ultimate bracha of Mashiach now.